So this happened back when I was about 7 or 8 years old. But as a 22-year-old, it's still very fresh in my mind. My family lived in a small suburban town in North Texas. It was a weekend, and my mother had taken me and my younger brother, who was about 3 at the time, to the local mall for school clothes, and I guess she was feeling particularly generous that day because after clothes shopping, she promised to take us to the Disney store to pick out a toy. So we were in the Disney store, and I was looking at this Little Mermaid Barbie doll thing. It was one of those, the ones you could take into the bath and its hair would change colors. I was about to point it out to my mom when my brother started having a temper tantrum about something. I'm not sure what he was fussing about, but I remember her telling me to just wait a moment, and she turned her back to me while my brother started thrashing and trying to run off in the other direction. Since she was clearly preoccupied, I decided to just sit there and keep staring at the doll. That's when I noticed this man walk up beside me. He had noticed the doll I was staring at and started asking a few questions. What I liked so much about it, how many other dolls I had, if I thought his little girl would like it. I was kind of only half paying attention, to be honest. I was way too absorbed in staring at that toy to even bother looking at this guy. I remember him asking how old I was, and the next thing I heard was my mother screaming my name as the guy picked me up and tried to fling me over his shoulder. I panicked, I screamed, and as the guy was running, I guess I had managed to kick and flail enough for him to lose his grip on me. So there I was, on the mall floor, crying and confused as my mom scooped me up, little brother in tow, and screaming for security. Apparently the guy had just kept running, and he managed to get outside before they could call a lockdown on the building. We never heard any news back from the police on finding the guy. I also never got my doll. It was creepy and traumatizing, and I really wish it had ended there, but it didn't. About 2 months later, we had a new family move in right across the street. I remember my mom commenting on how weird it was because the house had only been on the market for like a week. It was a couple, slightly older than my parents, with 2 little girls. One of which, Ashley, happened to be the same age as me. We became fast friends, and I was so excited she ended up being put in the same class as me. My dad and Darren, which was Ashley's dad, had also become fast friends, as most of the people in the neighborhood were elderly, and he was just happy to have someone to talk to. We had a bunch of barbecues together, but Mom always insisted the family was kind of weird, and thought it was rude how Ashley's mom never joined us. Anyway, since Mr. Darren, he insisted I called him by his first name, worked from home, and Mom was always busy with my 3-year-old brother, it quickly became the norm that Darren would be the one to pick me up from school with Ashley. He'd always joke that I was almost more his daughter than my parents' daughter, which was a comment I always shrugged off. And every day he'd ask me if I wanted to stay the night. I'd never spent the night at someone else's before, but it sounded like fun, and eventually I managed to convince my mom to let me. The first weird thing I noticed was around dinner time. Ashley's mom was always really quiet and kept to herself, but I thought it was super weird that she had cooked dinner, set the table, then immediately went to her bedroom. When I asked Ashley why her mom wasn't joining us, I was promptly shushed and asked to not talk about her mom anymore. So we ate, we watched a few movies, then we got ready for bed. This was weird. This was weird thing number 2. When Ashley said it was bedtime, I said okay and headed towards her bedroom. When I started crawling into her bed, she laughed and asked what I was doing. "We don't sleep in here, silly. We sleep with Daddy." She then took my arm and pulled me into her father's room, which I noted was not the same room her mother slept in. So her big sister, Ashley, and myself crawled up in bed with Mr. Darren. I thought it was really weird, but I'd never slept at anyone else's house before and just assumed that different families did stuff differently. And before you ask, no, he didn't do anything to me. Or if he did, my mind has effectively blocked that out from memory. To my knowledge, it was just a normal night. Anyway, so the next day was Saturday. I went home, and the weekend carried on like normal. Monday was when shit hit the fan, so to speak. It was lunchtime, and our class had just piled into the lunchroom when I saw Mr. Darren sitting at our table and waving at us. Parents did visit during lunch on occasion, so that wasn't particularly weird. Him insisting on sitting next to me instead of his own daughter and having his arm around me the entire time was pretty weird, though. I started feeling uncomfortable but didn't say anything, mainly because Ashley had been glaring daggers of jealousy at me the entire time, and I was scared saying something would make it worse. Lunchtime ended, and it was about time for recess. I said bye and told Mr. Darren I'd see him after school, and we headed outside. The moment we got to the playground, Ashley confronted me. "Daddy likes you. Now we have to move again." I had no clue what she meant by that, but she stormed off before I could ask. I saw Mr. Darren by the trees just outside the playground. That was very weird. Parents weren't allowed to join during recess, and all these red flags started going off in my head. I didn't know what was wrong, just that it was bad and I shouldn't go anywhere near him. He was calling me, though, and he had something in his hands. I really didn't want to be rude, so I walked over anyway. He said he had a present for me and gave me this pretty shiny pink wrapped box. I opened it and guess what was inside? A color-changing Little Mermaid doll. I was so excited. But something in the back of my mind was saying it was bad. There was something important about this doll. I'm sorry. I didn't know what. I didn't know what. Then he leaned down and whispered to me, "I remember how much you wanted this one." Now I was confused because I knew I'd never mentioned the doll to Mr. Darren before. I'd honestly forgotten about it. But then it clicked. I dropped the doll, started to take a few steps back. I started to take a few steps back. I guess he noticed because he started trying to reassure me, I guess. He told me not to worry because he was going to buy me all the Barbies that I wanted. And he was going to take me home tonight and I could be his little girl, and that he promised I'd be so much happier with him as my daddy. That's when I turned and ran. I bolted straight to the teacher's bench, crying my eyes out. I was too scared to even talk, so they took me to the counselor's office. Even after the counselor calmed me down, I never told them the whole story. I told them he scared me and told me he was going to take me away that night and that he was going to be my new daddy. That was enough for the school to call the police and file a restraining order, not letting him on school grounds whatsoever. I guess I was afraid if I told them any more that Ashley, my best friend, would hate me. My parents took me home early. My dad went over and told Darren he was never to come near me again. Ashley wouldn't speak to me the next day. 1 week later, they moved. I never heard from or saw that family again. Looking back now, I realize just how much danger I was in. I also have some heavy speculations that Ashley and Skylar, her older sister, may not actually have been Darren's children. I don't really know. I never told my parents the whole story. I often wonder if anything would have changed if I did, but I still to this day have nightmares about him. Nightmares about him breaking into my room at night. So, yeah, to the serial kidnapping bastard who tried to steal me from my mother, stalked me afterwards, and even became our neighbor just to get close to me, let's not meet again.